I am Zoe, a blonde, fit university student living in the heart of Los Angeles. I'm 21, and I've always known that my appearance turns heads. I stand at 5 feet 7 inches, with a physique that's the result of countless hours at the gym. My body is lean, sculpted, with curves in all the right places. My breasts are a natural 34C, something I've learned to carry with confidence. Today, I'm wearing a lacy pastel pink bra that matches the cheeky thong beneath my jeans. My feet are a size 7, with my toes painted in a vibrant coral shade that I just adore. Living with my stepdad, Michael, has been an adventure, to say the least. He came into my life when I was 15, after my mom remarried. Michael is a businessman, always in suits, with an air of authority that's hard to ignore. He's not my biological father, but over the years, our relationship has morphed into something much more complex than typical family ties. I remember the first time I realized there was something different about how he looked at me. It was during my senior year of high school. I was getting ready for prom, dressed in a tight, sparkling silver dress that hugged every curve. His eyes lingered a bit too long, a mix of pride and something else I couldn't quite place back then. As I moved to university, our relationship took on new layers. I live on campus but visit home often, especially during breaks. Michael's house feels like a sanctuary from my hectic college life, but it's also where I confront the blurred lines of our connection. One particular evening stands out. I had come home for the weekend, wearing a simple white tank top that contrasted sharply with my tan and a pair of short denim shorts. I was in the kitchen, reaching for a glass on the top shelf, when I felt his presence behind me. He was helping, but his touch was deliberate, lingering on my waist longer than necessary. "Zoe, you've grown into such a beautiful woman," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. I turned to face him, my heart racing not from fear, but from a mix of emotions I was still trying to navigate. "Thanks, Michael," I replied, my voice steady, masking the turmoil inside. Our conversations have since become more charged, more intimate. He compliments my appearance, sometimes in ways that feel too personal, like when he noticed the new shade of my nail polish or the cut of my jeans. There's an unspoken tension that fills the room whenever we're alone. I've never crossed the summer after my sophomore year. I decided to stay in LA for an internship. This meant more time at home with Michael. Each morning, I'd wake up to find breakfast ready, often with a note that read, "Good morning, beautiful." These gestures were sweet, but they seemed to carry a weight I wasn't sure how to interpret. One evening, after a long day at my internship, I came home to find Michael had prepared my favorite meal. He had set the table with candles, and the atmosphere was more like a date than a family dinner. We talked, laughed, and the conversation veered towards my life goals, my dreams, and what I wanted in a partner. His gaze was intense, making me feel both seen and uncomfortable. The air was thick with unspoken words as we cleaned up. Michael's hand brushed mine as we washed dishes, and I felt a jolt of electricity. I quickly moved away, excusing myself for a shower, needing space to think. In the shower, the water ran cold, but my thoughts were aflame. Was I imagining his looks, the touches, or was there something more? I stepped out, wrapping myself in a towel, only to find Michael waiting outside the bathroom, his expression unreadable. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay," he said, his voice gentle. "I'm fine," I managed, my voice betraying me with its quiver. "Just a lot on my mind." That night, as I lay in bed, I heard the soft footsteps of Michael passing by my door. Sleep was elusive, my mind racing with the complexities of our relationship. The next day, I dressed in a flowy sundress, choosing a yellow one that made my tan glow. I paired it with strappy sandals, my coral polish now slightly chipped. Michael complimented me again, his eyes lingering on the neckline of my dress, making me blush. We went for a walk in the park near our home, a place we used to go when I was younger. Now it felt different. The way he looked at me, the way he guided me with a hand on the small of my back, all felt charged with meaning. At one point, he stopped, facing me. Zoe, I... He paused, as if searching for the right words, or perhaps the courage to say them. I care about you, more than you might understand. I felt my heart skip. Michael, This is complicated, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. He nodded, his expression turning solemn. I know, but I want you to know, whatever you feel, whatever you decide, I'm here for you. The conversation left us both in a limbo of sorts. We continued to spend time together, the tension growing, each touch, each look, a silent conversation we were both afraid to vocalize. As summer drew to a close, I decided to confront what was happening. I needed clarity for my own peace of mind. One evening, I sat him down, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. Michael, we need to talk about us, I began, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. He looked at me, his eyes full of emotions I couldn't fully read. What about us, Zoe? I took a deep breath. I feel like there's something more here, something we're both skirting around, and it's not just me, is it? The silence that followed was one of the loudest moments of my life. Then he spoke, his voice low. No, it's not just you. This acknowledgement didn't bring relief, but rather a new set of questions about where we go from here, how we navigate this complex web of emotions and boundaries. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, Michael's gaze never left mine. His admission hung in the air, a confession that changed the dynamic between us irrevocably. I've felt this pull towards you for a while now, Zoe, he said, his voice a mixture of confession and concern. I've tried to ignore it, to keep things normal. But every time I see you, I can't help but think about how much you've become part of my life in a way I didn't anticipate. My heart was racing, not just from his words, but from the implications they carried. Michael, you're my stepdad. It's so complicated, I replied, my voice shaking slightly. He moved closer, the space between us diminishing until I could feel the warmth of his breath. I know it's complicated, Zoe, but sometimes the heart doesn't care about labels or roles. I care for you deeply, more than I should perhaps, but I can't change how I feel. I looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of doubt or deception, but all I saw was sincerity, perhaps tinged with a bit of guilt. What does this mean for us, for my mom, for everything we've known? I asked, my mind reeling with scenarios. I don't have all the answers, he admitted, his hand tentatively reaching out to brush a stray strand of my blonde hair behind my ear. But what I do know is that I want to be there for you, in whatever way you'll allow. The touch sent a shiver down my spine, a mix of thrill and fear. Michael, I started, but words failed me as his hand lingered, his fingers tracing down my cheek. He withdrew his hand, perhaps sensing my internal struggle. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, Zoe. I just want you to know how I feel, to understand that these feelings are not just fleeting. The room felt smaller, the air charged with an intensity that was almost palpable. I need time, Michael. I need to think about this, about us, I managed to say, my voice a whisper now. That night, sleep was elusive, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. The next morning, I decided to keep some distance, needing clarity. But Michael was there, as always, with a smile that was now different, knowing. He offered to drive me to my internship, and in the car the silence was loud, filled with our unspoken thoughts. Days passed, and though we maintained a facade of normalcy, there was an undeniable shift. His looks were longer, his touches more deliberate, always under the guise of care or concern. He nodded, respect in his eyes. Of course, take all the time you need. I'll be here. One evening, after I returned from a particularly exhausting day, he was waiting with dinner, a bottle of wine, and a movie set up in the living room. You look like you needed a break, he said as he handed me a glass of wine. We sat close, perhaps too close, on the couch. The movie played, but I was acutely aware of every movement he made, every time his thigh brushed against mine. Halfway through, he paused the movie. "Zoe, I've been thinking," he started, his voice soft, but with an edge of determination. "I don't want to push you, but I also don't want to pretend anymore. I'm attracted to you, not just as my stepdaughter, but as the incredible woman you've become." The wine glass nearly slipped from my hand. "Michael, it's dangerous," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know, and if you tell me to stop right now, I will," he replied, his eyes searching mine for any sign of consent or rejection. I didn't answer immediately, my heart and mind in conflict. His proximity, his scent, the warmth of him next to me, it all felt overwhelming. Slowly, I set my glass down, the decision made in a moment of surrender to the tumult of emotions. "I can't deny there's something here, Michael," I admitted, my voice trembling with the weight of my words. He leaned in, his lips hovering close to mine, giving me one last chance to pull away. When I didn't, he kissed me, a kiss that was both a beginning and an end to the life we knew. From that moment, our interactions changed. He was more open with his affection, his touches now lingering longer, his compliments more personal. We navigated around my mother, who was often away for work, keeping our new relationship shrouded in secrecy. But with each day, the line we crossed felt more blurred, our roles more confused. We were playing a dangerous game, one that could unravel everything if discovered. Yet, in the quiet moments, in his arms, it felt like we were in a world of our own, where the complications didn't exist. The summer's end was approaching, and with it, the return to university. The thought of leaving this behind, or perhaps facing it from afar, was daunting. But for now, we lived in the tension of what we had become, each day a new chapter in our complicated tale. As the end of summer neared, the reality of my departure for university loomed large. Michael and I had fallen into a pattern, a rhythm of secret rendezvous and stolen moments that felt both exhilarating and forbidden. Each day brought a new layer to our relationship, one we both knew we should end but couldn't. One evening, under the pretense of discussing my return to campus, we sat in the backyard, the night air cool against our skin. Michael reached for my hand, his touch now familiar, yet still sending sparks through me. "Zoe, what happens when you go back to school?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling the weight of our situation. "I want to keep this, whatever this is, but how do we do that?" He sighed, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "I've been thinking about that. Maybe we need some space. See if this is just a summer thing or something more." The suggestion stung, but I knew he was right. Space might be good, I agreed, though the thought of being away from him ached. That night, we spent our time together more deliberately, each touch, each kiss, feeling like it might be our last for a while. We talked about everything and nothing, avoiding the elephant in the room, our future. The morning I was to leave, Michael drove me to the university. The car ride was silent, filled with unspoken fears and hopes. At the drop-off point, he hugged me, the embrace lingering longer than usual. "Call me when you can," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. Back at university, life resumed its hectic pace, but thoughts of Michael were never far. We kept in touch via texts, our messages a mix of casual and charged with the memory of our summer. Each call, each text, felt like we were walking a tightrope between maintaining distance and drawing closer. Weeks turned into months, and the novelty of our situation began to wear off. The reality of our lives, the significant age difference, and the moral implications started to seep through our conversations. Michael was more reserved, perhaps feeling the weight of our choices more profoundly. One chilly November evening, after a particularly tough day, I called him, needing to hear his voice. "I miss you," I confessed, my voice breaking slightly. "I miss you too, Zoe," he replied, his tone heavy. "But we need to think about what we're doing here. To each other, to your mom, to ourselves? The conversation shifted then, becoming more about our individual lives rather than our shared moments. It was clear we were drifting, the excitement of summer cooling with the autumn air. Christmas break brought me back home, where the air was thick with tension. My mom was there, oblivious to the undercurrents between Michael and me. We were actors in our own lives, playing the roles of stepdaughter and stepdad with forced smiles and careful avoidance of eye contact. One night, when my mom was out with friends, Michael and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen. The silence was deafening until he finally spoke. "Zoe, I think we need to talk about us. Really talk." I nodded, feeling the gravity of what was to come. "I agree. This isn't sustainable, is it?" He shook his head, looking genuinely pained. "I care about you, Zoe, more than I should, but we can't keep this up. It's not fair to anyone, least of all to you." The conversation that followed was one of the hardest I've ever had. We spoke of love, guilt, and the need for both of us to find happiness, perhaps apart. We agreed to end whatever we had, to return to being family in the truest sense of the word. The rest of the break was awkward, filled with forced normalcy. I returned to university with a heavy heart, knowing that chapter of my life was closed. Yet, the bond we had shared, however complicated, would always be part of my story. Over the next few months, our communication dwindled to casual updates, the intimacy gone. I focused on my studies, on building a life for myself that wasn't shadowed by the complexities of that summer. Years later, when I was well into my career, settled in my own life, I received an invitation to Michael and my mom's anniversary party. Seeing him again, I felt a pang of nostalgia, but also a profound sense of peace. We hugged, a hug of old friends, of family, with none of the old tension. In that moment, I realized that while our path had been fraught with danger and confusion, it had also taught us about the boundaries of love, the importance of family, and the power of letting go. Our story was one of growth, mistakes, and ultimately healing.